Hey there, hope you're doing good. Let's continue refactoring Futurecam. Let's start by working on this small task. Remove long recording mode since only burst mode is different. So we have 4 modes: light trail, time lapse, long exposure, and burst. Among these, many of the modes require you to tap once to start recording and again tap to stop recording, like a video, right? Think of how you capture a video, you tap twice, as opposed to a photo where you tap only once. So all these three, long exposure, light trail, and time lapse, work that way. To distinguish them from a short recording mode, we have a protocol called long recording mode. But you don't really need a protocol for only one class. So you have 4 classes, 3 are one type, 1 is of one type. So instead of defining a protocol to disambiguate these 2 categories, you could just special case the burst mode alone. So here, this class abstract video mode is the superclass of both time-lapse mode and light trail mode. Then you have long exposure mode. You can see all 3 inherit from long recording mode. So let's see if we can do something about this. Basically, if you have multiple classes which are short recording and multiple classes that are long recording, then you need this protocol. But with only one, it doesn't make sense. So here you would say if self is not burst mode. So the concept of long recording mode still applies. The only one that is not a long recording mode is the burst mode. Now we can swap these two to remove the knot. Okay. Current long recording, not currently long recording. I also make these typos, not intended as a criticism of the engineer who wrote this code, but we can fix it. See, in practice we were doing this anyway in some places, and in some places we are checking the protocol, so we should do one or the other. And again, really a protocol to delineate one class is overdoing it. Let's write a comment at burst mode. the burst mode captures a burst at 30 fps. First you should write what it is, then you can give details. The burst mode is the only mode a machine doesn't contain any unnecessary parts. For the same reason, a sentence shouldn't contain any unnecessary words. Okay, this is the only mode that works with a single tap of the shutter button. This is the only mode that doesn't require 2 taps of the shutter button. One to start recording and one to stop. In light trail, time lapse and long exposure are long recording modes. Okay, because at some point in the code we need to introduce the concept of a long recording mode. Here it just says what long recording modes do, but someone reading this will think, what is a long recording mode? So you should define your concepts. Just as in a textbook, concepts are defined before they are used. Okay, so where are we? Yeah, see, there's a lot of junk in mode. So mode is like a fat class or a fat object. It provides a bunch of things that not everyone uses. For example, some of these are only for long recording modes. This is not a good design. A class shouldn't be like a menu of unrelated services that it offers to anyone. Right, like a restaurant, right? Like they'll offer all kinds of dishes which you don't eat together. It's not like if you eat a idli, you will go with chutney along with the idli. It's not like that, right? It's like idli, it's like vada, it's like dosa, it's like uttapam, whole bunch of stuff, and no one will consume all of them. A class shouldn't be like that. The same concept, when applied to the interface of a class, is called a fat interface. So here's an example of that. This is a Java interface or a protocol, as Apple developers would call it. And it says, so this is a list, right? It has various functions like add, and it says optional operation. And it throws an unsupported operation exception if it is not supported. This is a fat interface, and this is bad programming practice. The Java collection library is not poorly designed. It's among the best possible in a statically typed language. It's an example of good object-oriented design. So you should really go through the Java collection hierarchy. I'm not saying it's badly designed. I'm just saying this interface, the fact that it has a lot of methods that not all implementations provide or use, is a bad design. So similarly, having nulls is a bad design. So anyway, this should be refactored. So great, we have captured this. So when you identify unrelated design problems in the middle of some other refactoring, just put a to do. Don't distract yourself. Yeah, again. All right. Oh, this should be called long recording analytics data. So this is not used for burst mode. Interesting. Okay. Let's look at our diffs. This is unrelated. This is fixed. This just records from mode. So this is often a question of ideal versus pragmatic. Ideally, you should have a protocol. You shouldn't be special casing a class. Like this. Ideally, if you look at it from principles of object-oriented design, this is bad code. But practically it can be overkill when you have only one. So that's the thing about right versus pragmatic. And object-oriented design principles or any other kind of design principles, even if you're using a functional programming language like Haskell, these principles are not good, they're not bad. They are guidelines. They say if you have this problem, consider the solution. For example, to give a non-coding example, they say you should have a different email ID for work and personal. That makes sense. But if you're a consultant, if you're doing a one-man business, then that separation doesn't make sense. And blindly creating it doesn't help you. It just creates overhead. So treat design principles as guidelines. Ask, does this guideline actually make code easier or harder to understand? It's not a rule that needs to be followed, right? It's not like you need a passport to go abroad. Like it doesn't matter whether you consider that necessary or not, you need it. This is not like that. Okay, so this was everything but burst mode. Now we have inverted this. So we have swapped these two. I don't like knots and guards. Here also ideally I won't use a knot, but there's nothing else I can do because there isn't an else block. If there is, I would remove this knot and swap the if and else. So it's fine. So many of us engineers who are really good do these things. We define all of these extensibility things, but it requires discipline, and I also need to improve at this. It requires discipline to say, okay, we can do it when we need it. Like we don't need to do everything on day one in anticipation of the future, which never arrives sometimes or often. Like in this code, it did not grow to 3-4 long recording modes and 3-4 short recording modes. If it did, then this protocol would have helped. So don't try to foresee the future. You will foresee wrong and you'll over engineer your code. Build for what you have. if you get a thought that this requires a protocol, it's not a bad thought. You just need to have a second level of filtration of your thoughts and ask, this is a good thought, but is it a good thought for now? All right, let's look for something else to do. Yes, remove is running on simulator. So Apple offers an iOS simulator, which is an app that runs on the Mac. That makes sense for CRUD apps. It doesn't make sense for apps that work closely with the device like Futurecam. It's easier and better just to buy a bunch of iPhones, one for each team member. And if budget is an issue, buy the oldest iPhone, the cheapest one. I can't see the nesting level. Is it global? Yes. So this function can be here. It's just used to detect testing bits. It shouldn't be exposed. Can this fit on one line? Yes, it can. Okay. This should still be nullable since if you're looking for the telephoto or the ultra wide camera, it's missing on some iPhones. So, okay. Yeah, I don't see the point of this. Oh, if permission is restricted. Okay, fine. Never mind. This makes sense. So there are two kinds of things, denied and restricted. Permission denied means you get a prompt, can this app use the camera, and you say no. Restricted means parental controls are in place, or the device is enrolled in MDM, mobile device management. It's a device issued by a company, and the admin has locked out the camera. So then it will be null. So this is still needed. Okay, cool. Funny, there's only one use of is running on simulator. Again, commit messages should have reasons. Like you didn't do something just because you felt like it, you did it because there's a reason, right? Okay, this one says replace verifications with force unwrap. Yes. Let's just look at the signature of functions. We can do this. Colon dots, this is a regex. Colon dot star and then a question mark. Yeah, this is a yes. So we want anything that is optional. Yeah, this class inherits from a protocol, so it needs to have the same interface. Yeah, this has to be optional because yeah, the capture can fail. This is optional for the same reason. This can be null. Why is this optional? Okay, don't want to look at the controller code. Func dot star, instead of a colon we need to use an arrow. Let's start with this. Yeah, I see. Okay, let's look at this code, then you'll see my point. Oh, it's the same one. Here, there are two ways to handle this. One is oops, bad indentation. One is have the function return nil and have the caller handle it, which is quote unquote correct way of doing it, the correct way of doing it. But we can also handle it here. I don't see why this doesn't work or shouldn't work. So if we make this non-optional and handle it here and crash, would that be easier? Let me see if I can log into Firebase and see if this verification actually happens. So I checked Firebase and this is not happening in production. So we can simplify this. by making it crash. So now if you look at the diffs, this is no longer returning optional. Whenever you return an optional, be it a normal optional like this or an implicitly unwrapped optional with an exclamation mark, if you have a function do something that returns some class A, and then you have the code. You could write it this way, or you could write it this way. This will cause the compiler to check that you are checking for nil before you use it. So it's a type safety thing. Or this, where the compiler will not come in your way. So this could be nil at runtime, but you can use it and it will crash if it's not. But the compiler won't come in the way. So here you are saying, I know I have taken care of it, don't come in my way, compiler. So if you use either the second or the third one, you are creating more work for the caller of your function to deal with the nil. Don't do that. Functions should encapsulate as much as possible. They should do as much as possible for the caller. That's why the function exists in the first place. Because anyway, we have a check here. So we have two checks here. One to return nil, another to handle nil. You can collapse them. And you don't need a return after this. And the iOS tooling captures this error and it uploads it. So iOS, when this app is running on production devices, if you invoke this, iOS captures this, it uploads to the Apple servers, and you can see how often this is happening, if it is happening. So once the app is working fine, you don't need to obsess about like 1 in 1000 crashes. That's good. That will help you fix the problem. This is a system where I have built, where you log it to Firebase Analytics specifically, and the app continues running, but you don't know whether it will work properly or crash. So don't overcomplicate things. Yeah, this is needed because tele and ultra wide, but is this needed? Okay, never mind. This also doesn't happen. Are there two extensions on CV pixel buffer pool? There are two extensions on CV pixel buffer. One is for save. Oh, one is for bit. Okay, never mind. Even if you write this defensive code, if you're not sure which error happens in production and which one doesn't, take the opportunity to fix the code later on. So guard let buffer equal to buffer. Actually, something else we can probably do. We can do this. So let's compare the two ways of doing it. This is one way. Of course, we'll delete one of them. This was the original way, and here you have to do this, which is bad. So we'll use a guard. So let's compare the two. This is optional in both cases. You are creating the object, you are storing the error, and if the buffer is null, you are crashing here, and here you are doing a guardlet. Oh, there should be an else. Yeah, it's fine, this is good enough. Are we even using this? Oh, optional maximum is not being used. Sometimes we implement things for symmetry, but you don't need it. So optional minimum, going back to it. Can we simplify this code is the question. Yeah, this will get eliminated soon because we are going to clean up this code. Minimum. Actually, putting the to do here doesn't help. Should be in abstract video mode. To do delete so this one, it has to be this. Okay, index with title. Okay, that title may not exist. So this is a segmented controller, and in iOS a segmented control is something that looks like this. Look at this, complete, incomplete, pending. There are multiple states and only one of them can be chosen, or it also used to look like this depending on the OS and stuff. So this is a segmented control and it may not have the title. So this is a valid use of optional. Let's look for this. Now what has gone wrong here? Func dot star func function name arrow, then any number of characters, then an exclamation mark, then any number of characters, then an opening brace. Okay, I guess we are done with this task. Let's commit it, then only mark the task as done in the task tracker. That's it. Good discipline. Obtain buffer. We have to check who is using obtain buffer. We don't need this anymore. You can see how one simplification leads to another. So here obtain buffer is no longer optional. So the fast video writer class, this extension, when it calls this, it no longer needs to check for this, and because of that, this itself no longer needs to return optional. Because of that, this again doesn't need to. So you can see how the simplification cascades. Avoid returning an optional when not really required to simplify callers. The reason I first commit and then delete the task in the task tracker is sometimes something else may go wrong. Maybe somebody else has made some other commit that conflicts with this and I'll need to resolve that, right? So don't mark it as done till it's really done. And I'll see you in the next video.